Voices from the Mausoleum is brought to you by the You Run Podcast Network and yourunpodcast.com. And a very special thank you to our Patreon subscribers. And while we still have your attention, be sure to check out the Dewey Pod Monster podcast, available where all podcasts are downloaded. The podcast's all about consumption, beer, music, movies, TV. Nothing is off limits. They're really fun. Go check them out. Hey everyone, welcome to another Found Footage Fridays. You might be seeing or realizing there's a little bit of a different setup today. Someone's back a little early.
Yeah, just for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, just for this one.
Yeah, I've got my pillows sorted so my back doesn't hurt. We're good today.
So we're continuing our multi-week retrospective look back at the Paranormal Activity franchise. This week we're up to Paranormal Activity 3. Let's get out of the way of the poster. Yeah. So I know, Angel, you said this is one of, if not your favorite of the series.
It's my favorite. It's my number one. I rank it higher than the first one.
Yeah. It's really good. So, you know, pre spoilers, I mean, general thoughts about, like, what do you love about this one? Why is this your number one?
Yeah, so I think the biggest selling point for this is the kids. I think the kids do such a great job of convincing, and you know, you buy into the story. And I think, because obviously, like, I think a lot of people in the horror community feel this way, but there's just like something about like spooky kids and getting to see this story, you know, that we've been fed through 1 and 2 of like this is what's happening with this family. This is where it came from. We don't really get a lot of insight into the actual experiences, just that there were some. And I just think that the family dynamic in this is super believable, and I really love it. I love the tie-ins in the end. I love that they took some of the things that worked in the first 2 and really amplified them. There's some concepts in this, or some things that they do to create scares that I just think is just really, really good. Like, this has this particular Paranormal Activity has like one of my favorite like haunted scares ever, and it's the well, I guess we'll talk about it a little bit, but that has one of my favorite scares. And I know this is like, he's not like a super main character, but like the guy that plays the friend of the mom's boyfriend.
Yeah.
I felt like the way they put him in the story and the things that happened with him were just so realistic. I loved it so much. Like, I just felt like that was something that felt like, this is scary as a child and an adult. Here's these things happening. I don't know. I just think it was such a well put together film. I don't think it has like a weak moment or a lull. I mean, it's pretty much from start to finish. It's just got some really great stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like you said, you know, it really builds on the first 2. I think both in I love how from 1 to 3, you know, we're going back in time a little bit more each time. Oh, between 1 and 2 for sure, but then full on to the 80s in this third one. But I think the character dynamics get stronger with each entry up to the third one.
Yeah.
Because I really enjoyed the family dynamics in 2. I enjoy Katie and Mika in the first one, but it's the first film, you know, this was sort of their first attempt at it.
Yeah.
You know, and then I think it just gets a little bit stronger. Whereas in their mom and then her boyfriend in this one, along with his friend / coworker, and I'm trying to think, who else was it? Did we have? I mean, we had the babysitter. And that was really
it.
That was really it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty also like very contained, but the girls do a phenomenal job as a young Katie and Christy. This is, and I feel like we both love this. I think this is a fair comparison. This feels like a found footage Poltergeist. Because it's
I hadn't thought about that. I bet that's why I like it so much.
This really is a found footage Poltergeist because it is the 80s. You have the child dynamic. There are nods to it, especially with like stuff in the kitchen. Man, there was another one that was coming to mind as well. There's a scene with the babysitter that reminds me a bit of Poltergeist, which we'll get into with spoilers. But
the way they chose to do the the certain scenes with the lights
Mm-hmm.
was, I mean, obviously, like, obviously, right? We've seen that 100 times, but there is something about the way that that's shot that does, I can see, like, feels like you're experiencing that all over again from Poltergeist. I had never thought about that before. That's such a great comparison.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are definitely some heavy nods to it here.
Yeah,
And it feels pretty genuinely 80s. You know, sometimes when you do a period piece, it
sure,
doesn't quite match. And then, of course, the camera looks really good for the 80s,
sure,
you know, which is
sure.
fine. You know, we're not going to watch a whole thing and, although VHS does it pretty okay. So I don't know.
Well, and I will say the other big thing for me with this one is the justification for the camera stuff. So,
Mhm.
like, you're not just having some random person who's like, this is going to be my new hobby. It's like, that's what the boyfriend did for a living. So, he already knew the
Yeah.
equipment, he had the equipment. And I think, like, such small, little details like that change the game when you're talking about found footage movies, because that's
Mhm.
something we talk about all the time is, why are you filming? How do you just all of a sudden have all this equipment? What is the goal? What is the point? Because even though there's a point in the first one, it's still a bit stretched. And then it turns into a point where you're like, but for what reason at this point are you
Yeah.
still? And then, we got a slower progression into the obsession of it in this one than we did in the first one with Mika. But yeah, it's super, just you just buy it. Like, you're just like, yeah, makes sense. Got it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because he stumbles on it, right? With Mika, it was like we're introduced to the camera element
Yeah.
because there's stuff going on. Whereas in
Right.
this, it's discovered, right? And then kind of goes
It's
from
an
there.
accident. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, it feels a little
Yeah.
more organic.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree.
Definitely. I'm trying to think what else besides, that, so we're not going too much into spoiler territory here. But
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think some of the scares are fantastic in this.
Yep.
Definitely innovative. I think when you, especially by the third film in a franchise,
Yeah.
right, you start to think like, okay, we go from just one camera to like home security to back
Mhm.
to one camera, but not
Yeah.
really. It's sort of,
Yeah.
you have to think of different ways,
Mhm.
make it interesting and dynamic to watch.
Yeah.
So I think they do that really well here. I would say these first three movies, I think 4 and 5 have their moments, right? But I think the original, the first three here, is
Strongest.
a solid series of films.
Yeah, I hated 4.
I'm gonna have to. It's been so long since I watched. I'm gonna rewatch it for the series. It's been a minute
Yeah.
since I've been back to it.
I think I probably mentioned it when we talked about doing, or that, that was gonna be the series right now. But Addie and I literally just rewatched all of these, like, a few months back. We rewatched all of them, including Next of Kin. So I'm like, I literally, like, it's so fresh because we just watched them all the way through. 'Cause I don't think she had seen them all. But yeah, I think that of the entire frame, of course, I also like ones that people don't like. I loved marked ones. I don't know why people don't like that one. I thought that one was really good.
Oh yeah,
Um, but I did not like 4. I thought I think 4 to me is pretty neck and neck with 2 for the weakest 2 of the franchise. But yeah, I think that the way that they chose it's hard because, like you were saying, when you're continuing a franchise, especially by a third movie, to be able to hold on to making it still feel like a paranormal activity film while also adding these new concepts, these new types of scares, building up the tension, kind of changing things around so that it is still new stuff. That's a really hard balance. And I think this movie just nails that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they really hit the ground running here, and they
Yeah. Totally
because I
agree.
really think it's also because we get into a lot more lore around it, and I think they're really starting to. This really builds out the world, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause we don't get any of this stuff until 3. Like, the story from before is really, I guess parts of it are a little obvious, like, are explained a little more clearly, but a lot of the background and stuff is super vague in
Mhm.
1. And then when you get into 2, you get, like, a little bit more because obviously, like, I mean, 2, ends the way that it does involving the baby and stuff, but you still don't really get a big picture of what is going on, why is this happening, how has this been going on for this long until 3. And to be able to set up the future of the franchise while also explaining the past of it, I think that's really clever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So before we get into spoilers and really dig into the meat and potatoes of it, what would you give Paranormal Activity 3?
Paranormal Activity 3 is a 9 out of 10 tapes for me.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
And I will not quite match you, but I'm going to be at an 8.5
Yeah.
for three, which is I think what I gave two.
Where do you rank this one? Is it
Um,
in 3rd place or
it is in second. So
okay.
yeah, I think it's because I really like two actually.
Oh,
So for me, it's like 2, 3, 1. I think it's sort of in there.
really?
Yeah,
That's surprising. Okay. Yeah.
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 But yeah, so we're gonna head over into spoilers. So if you haven't seen this, what are you doing? But
Yeah.
go watch it and then
Yes.
come back. So we're gonna head into our spoiler section of Paranormal Activity 3. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just the whole kit and caboodle of why this is happening comes
Mhm.
back to this coven, this sort of
Yeah.
yeah, which ties into the family, right? So sweet old grandma is a witch.
Happy. I know. And it's
I
crazy, right? Because you don't have, like I can't think off the top of my head anyway, I'm sure there are, but, like, to combine those 2 elements, I really liked that. Like, I love witchy stuff, and so to
yeah.
combine this to go from being this just demonic possession ghost story into this, like, other element of the supernatural world, I think is surprising. Like, because when I
Mhm.
think, if I remember correctly, the first time I saw this one, when it got to that part, I was like, no shit. Like, I was like, really? Like, of all the things?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Because I mean, yeah, the whole demonic possession thing, and just demons in general, it's
Mhm.
overdone for
Mhm.
sure.
Oh, yes. Yes.
But I think to add another element just gives it a little more of a juicier reason for happening
Yeah.
versus just you played with a Ouija board and here's this demon, or like it's just the devil testing people, right?
Whatever the case is, right.
Whatever the
Sure.
case is. I mean, like
Yeah.
old classic like black magic witchcraft, making deals with the devil and all that good stuff. Like that's classic sort of part of it, but we don't really
Mhm.
see that as much in a lot
No,
of the big budgets, stories.
not
So to see
anymore.
that
Yeah.
weaved in here, so it's just so cool. And I
Yeah.
love the little hints throughout the film. Like
Mhm.
I don't know if you probably caught this because you just watched it, but I didn't realize that there was a conversation that the grandma was having with mom in the bedroom, and she was like, "Don't you want to try for a third one? You always said you wanted a boy." And I was like, "I see what you're doing there, trying to get that firstborn son."
Scheming. Yep.
Yeah. So I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, cool." I like just seeing that, and you don't really quite pick up on that maybe the first go around.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to the generational stuff because I think there's something that makes it more scary that way
Hmm.
than if it is like it being a random spirit. Like that works too. I'm not saying I mean the first one is in my opinion is very scary.
Hmm.
But I think that when you add this element of like this is a different like in the first one we get okay, like it's not the house that's haunted, it's you. All right, that's pretty creepy. Don't like that. But when you add this element of like it's tied to your genetics, like your blood is
Hmm.
connected to this thing, that takes that original, ooh, that's uncomfortable to like, that's really scary. Like to think
Yeah.
of what that could mean for you and your place in the world, your existence, like all of those things coming back. And it's something to making it this generational thing that just takes that original concept of being discomfort or uncomfortable and then just like elevating that into like the next level.
Yeah, right, right. Well, it's like, yeah, it's just this family lineage, and just like the whole idea of you can't run from where your family, or can't run
There's
from
nothing
who
you
you
can
are,
do.
and
Yeah.
you are who you are.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I know it just adds sort of an extra feeling of just being trapped in that situation.
Yeah. What can you do? I mean,
And
you
then you
can't
have,
do anything.
and then you're someone who has kids, and it's like, well, you're passing that on to your kids.
You are. And it's like that weird feeling of like you can't escape family.
Hmm.
Like, it's like trying to get rid of toxic family members. You feel
Yeah,
bad because you're like they're toxic, but you also know it's like better for you if you don't. It's kind of like an extreme version of that because like family's supposed to be a safe place.
yeah,
So what do you do when everything that you knew, everything you thought you loved and understood is actually part of what's trying to do this to you or to your family or whatever? And it's really unsettling.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and the family elements here are very strong. I mean, between
Mhm.
Christy and Katie and their mom, and um, totally blanking on the boyfriend's name, but
I can't think of it either. It's not Mika. I know that, but I can't
not
think of his
Mika. I don't know. He's cute though. I like this
name.
boyfriend.
I do too. I like him too. And he's so okay. So Mika is like the worst, right? Mika is so mean. He's such a pain in the butt. Like he's so aggravating as a character.
Yeah.
And it was a nice change of focus because, as you know,
Mhm.
one of my least favorite tropes is when this woman has an experience and her partner, spouse, whatever, treats her like she's nuts and discredits everything and just acts like she's crazy. This kind of takes that and flips it around because it's him that's like, no, something's going on. Like when he catches, this is one of my favorite things in this franchise. My second favorite total, but one of my favorites is when they have the earthquake
Mhm.
and the dust falls and it
Yeah.
lands on the spirit or the ghost of what's his name? Toby while he's
Toby.
there.
Yeah.
And then he like shakes it off. I have goosebumps. The first time I saw that, I was like, oh my God.
It looks good.
It looks amazing. And that's when he notices something is up. He's like, wait a
Mhm.
second, do you see this? Like, and he shows his coworker slash friend, and there's that whole thing like there is like his reaction to stuff and the way he still is so because he's not their dad, the
Mhm.
the girl's dad, but he's so protective over them. He fights until the last second to
Yeah.
keep them safe, to protect them. And there's just something about seeing a male character in that type of role and treating the situation the way he treats it that made me happier with the overall dynamic, like what we were talking about earlier, and why it just works.
He's a much more likable character.
God, yes. I
Yeah.
hate Mika. I love his name. I think Mika's a cool name, but I hate him as a character.
He was a jerk.
He's a jerk. Like, and like,
And so
I
was the dad
remember
in 2.
yeah, I
He's a
like,
jerk too.
oh my God, when Scott and I did, Paranormal Activity for You Run with Voices, um, we talked about that, and I was like, "He's so mean to her," and Scott was like, "He's such a troll." He was like, "Yeah, but, like, he's not wrong, like, it is her fault," and I'm like, "Shut up, Scott." It's not her fault. It wasn't that bad until Mika got the cameras. But this is a much more likable male partner role in a paranormal story than we get because most of the
Yeah.
time they're the jerks. They're the ones that are like, "You're nuts. I don't believe you." Whatever. Like, and I say this every time this comes up. Looking at you, Josh from Insidious, like that whole attitude of like, I get so sick of it. So I love this as a change of overall of like, there's like
Yeah.
something more to be done with these characters than just guffawing over, paranormal experiences. And I loved that.
Yeah, and he uses his relationship with the girls to kind of try to figure out what's going on, and not use in like a
A
bad way,
negative. Yeah.
right? It's more of like he really genuinely does care about them, and so when he's talking to
Mhm.
Christy at like the tea table and just
Yeah.
trying to learn about Toby, and yeah, it's very sweet. It's very genuine with the girls. But from there, right, you get like really some really good scares. Like I think of like the cubby in their bedroom, right? That little crawl space, which is like as a
God,
kid, I would not want to go in there. I don't know
so
what,
creepy. Oh, yeah.
and I know they see sort of the symbol drawn on there.
Mhm.
But let's talk. I mean, let's go into some of like the classic scares. I think the one that you
Yeah.
were alluding to is the kitchen one with the fan, right?
Oh my God, the fan. Talk about building up a scene. And that's something that takes me back to the first one. The first one was great about building up
Building the
moments.
suspense. Yeah.
And you know that we're seeing the footage because something is going to happen. But there's that moment where it's such a simple thing with the sheet,
Hmm.
but it worked, man. It worked.
Well, it's because it's the size of the girl, so you think like, okay, it's the girl sort of messing around, but maybe
Yep.
not.
Yeah, you're not sure. You don't trust it. Yeah.
You're not sure, and then when it drops, man, it's good.
So
Um, the whole babysitter sequence is fantastic. From the sheets, and this is where I was thinking about Poltergeist when she goes and she's looking at the cubby in the corner, and it blows the wind in her face. Like that was reminding
Mhm.
me in Poltergeist when they're all downstairs and
And she comes down the steps. Yeah.
she
And
could
they
feel her
feel
move.
her come down the
Yeah,
step. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was that sort of moment. But yeah, that whole like babysitter sequence I think is so good.
It is really, really good. Yeah.
Oh,
I also really liked the scene where they were gonna play Bloody Mary.
yes.
That one was really good. And it's funny because like to me, like, the guy, the friend coworker, he is like in control, or he's the parent in this situation, or the
Mhm.
person who's supposed to be taking care of is it Christy that he's with? Because
Christy
they
is with
took
him.
Katie.
Oh, no,
Yeah, okay.
Katie, because it's the older girl that's with him. I think it's
Oh, so
Katie.
it's Katie.
Yeah.
Okay. So I couldn't remember. So he's with Katie. They took Christy. And so he's like responsible for her.
Yeah.
And he's like playing into it. He's super nice to them. I love that. Like he's playing. But then when things get serious, that was a very realistic reaction to something going crazy when you're responsible for a child that does not belong to you. And there's just something so genuinely like real about those reactions that he has when
Mhm.
that happens, but all the stuff moving around, the noises, like it's such a good scene. Like that whole thing from them going into the bathroom and experiencing the crazy stuff, like and the character, the little girl that plays Katie, young Katie, just did such a phenomenal job of being scared and
Yeah.
helpless and not knowing what to do. And she's with someone who she knows and likes, but is not her comfort person, and that's obvious. Like she is like almost like a distrust of like, what are we gonna do? Like I
Yeah.
don't know. I love that sequence so much. I think it's really strong.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's so sweet when she's sort of like goes from sort of just being that playful kid. It's like, oh, let's do something scary for the fun of it to like, oh no, I don't want to do this anymore.
I
This is really
know.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why it's definitely Katie because Christy wouldn't do that. Wouldn't play the game. Or didn't want to anyway. Um, but yeah, I mean that also like for a kid's room, that's a pretty swanky bedroom. I don't know.
It's
It's like
cool. Their little loft.
it's like a whole loft situation,
It's
but they really
cool.
use that to the advantage, right? Because when Christy
Mhm.
is walking along the ledge and jumping off, and you
I
ooh, and you expect her to like get hurt, like you think like Toby's trying to
'Cause
hurt
she
her, but
jumps. Yeah.
she jumps, but she lands gracefully, and she's just come back up, and I'm like, oh, that was good, yeah.
Yeah. You're
Um,
expecting hurt. You're expecting
well, yeah,
a
you think
hospital
this,
visit or something. Yeah.
well, you realize it sort of makes sense because Toby's not trying to hurt the girls, right?
No.
Toby
No.
was trying to bring them into the fold so that way when they get older, they can give him their firstborn son,
Yeah.
And so eventually, right? But you don't know that really until
No.
later in. So like you're thinking like, okay, these girls are in real trouble. But I thought they also did a good job, I think, doing sort of the same thing. You sort of get like night one, night two, night three.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
it doesn't get tired in this one either,
Mm-mm.
I
No.
don't think.
No. I don't think so. I think the setup works. It's kind of goes back to it making it just feel like a Paranormal Activity movie. I think if they remove too many of those things, then it would just feel like a different thing
Mhm.
altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Which I know Next of Kin does, but that's neither here nor there. Although the marked ones does it, right?
What does the
Night one, night two.
no, I don't
No, they
think so.
don't do it either.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so because that's very cell phone.
Right.
There's a lot of like mix of types of clips versus like it's not the same where it's like set up specifically
Yeah.
to capture, you know what I mean? It's different. So I don't think it does
It
though.
sticks mainly
Because
to 1 through 5. Like the core movies are all the same that way.
yeah, because the marked ones, stuff happens like during the day.
Yeah.
Like a lot of stuff happens during the day too, which I guess this does too, but it doesn't
Mhm.
have that like breakup with the
Oh no, no, no. I mean, that's the thing with this one, right? It's like you get the setup of the nightly stuff, but then you
Mhm.
also get a lot of the day stuff. Whereas in the first Paranormal Activity, the day stuff doesn't really happen until like the day stuff, the
The
scary day
end.
stuff doesn't happen until closer to the end. I mean, they talk to
Yeah.
each other during the day, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
Um, and then the other like really great one was when the boyfriend gets bent in half.
oh, that's a great it's just such a good finale because it's such like a WTF kind of
It's
like
heartbreaking too. It gets
yeah.
me feeling things like when that happens. Like you really start to feel the hopelessness of what these girls are about to go through because it was
Hmm.
their last shot. The mom hanging up at the top of the stairs and then yeah, the way he moves cuz like I got uncomfortable when they went there. Like that's when you
Hmm.
start to realize like something's up. Like you
Yeah.
start to realize and then obviously you start to see the as everything else unfolds, but The that scene though, he's trying so hard to save them.
It is heartbreaking.
And it's like, oh, and uncomfortable and like, oh, but it's also like that was it. That was like, and it's crazy, right? Because they don't get out of whatever because of the way it leads into the rest of the movies that are the one, 1 and 2. But for some reason, you're still hopeful. Like you're still just like he's gonna save them because that's what adults do for children, but that's not what happens.
Yeah.
And that's really scary. Like
Yeah. That's where this
I
one differs from Poltergeist. We don't get any sort of sweet ending.
God no. No, like bathtub huggy crying scene.
No, none of that. But
Yeah.
no, but over. I mean, it's just so cool.
Mhm.
Trying to think what other elements we haven't really touched on.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm like blanking.
Yeah, I think the rest of it is subtle stuff, things moving,
Yeah,
lights flickering, noises, um, Christy having conversations when we don't see anybody there. There's a
yeah. Her
lot of, like,
talking to Toby is great.
little, like, nuanced things like that that really just make you go, "Ooh,"
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, I mean, with the light falling. I mean, I like sort of how they keep certain elements, right? Because it gets a little windy in there. I remember from the first Paranormal Activity with like the lamp or the light post or the chandelier or whatever is like shaken, and then I
Oh,
like
the
how they
one
sort of
downstairs?
they
Mhm.
kept it with the one down here.
The
With that.
light bulbs go out when the mom is downstairs at one point. They, like,
Yeah.
break or something shatters. The light gets really bright, I think, and then it, like,
The light
shatters.
at the foyer
Yeah.
drops, but it doesn't
That's
break.
part of our living room front door
Mhm.
view or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but then, like, yeah, but I mean, also just the elements of like Christy coming to the bedroom and standing there for hours watching them. Like, I
Yep.
just sort of love also the consistency where
Yeah.
you're not necessarily repeating the same scares, but like it's the same demon, so it's going to act in the same way.
Yeah. We get shots of the hallway or whatever outside the parents' room, the light flickering on and off, just like we did
Hmm.
in one, her running back and forth, like footstep type things. Yeah, it's surprisingly consistent for a found footage franchise. As
Yeah.
much as I love found footage, the franchise element of found footage can be hit or miss. And
Hmm.
so, this is really, really consistent for the first three.
I mean, as far as like big budget franchises, there's only really this one. I mean,
Yeah, for bigger budget, yes.
because I think of Blair Witch isn't all. It's only one found footage movie. Um,
Yep.
not to bring up that. Um, and then the other one, I'm thinking Black Ball Goes, which is like,
Yeah, that one's so good.
I mean, picking up the mantle for sure. I wish it
I
got the recognition that Paranormal Activity gets, but
I think it's on its way. I think it'll get there because there's a lot of people starting to follow and watch and keep up
Mhm.
with, you know.
Yeah,
Um, but the other thing is it's obviously, the first one of this had a theatrical release and it was really successful from what I remember.
yeah. Oh man,
Um,
it just yeah. I mean, so we talked about this when we covered the first one a couple of weeks ago. It was like it was made in '07, got
yeah.
picked up by Spielberg. He reworked the end, helped them rework the ending, or he gave them like notes on it.
Yeah. There's
And
like
then
3. There's like 3 endings, 2 or 3.
yeah, so the one that we got in '09 with with her throwing Mika and all that, that was a
What was the theatrical one?
that is a
Which one's
theatrical one.
That's the theatrical
So the
ending.
one originally in '07, he dies. I don't think
Is it
she's
the
released.
police? There's a police one
There's a
too.
police one where they both die, I think. It's much more closed-ended.
Yeah.
And then there's the other one is also when she kills herself in the doorway.
Kills herself. That's the one where she rocks?
So she
No,
doesn't she slit her
she does. The rocking one is the police.
is the
She's
police.
rocking, rocking, rocking. She hears the police. She snaps out of it. She goes down. They shoot her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah, no,
think, well, and I think the ending change to the other one where she throws him really sets up the rest of his story because she needs to still be alive.
well, that's the thing, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
Spielberg was like saying, like, you want to make this a franchise, you
She
better have
has
it.
to be alive.
You got to have an open ending.
'Cause that little message comes up that's like, "They were never s
Yeah,
no one knows where Katie is," or whatever.
yeah. I mean, the closed ending works if it's going to be a one and done thing, sure. But
Sure.
we wouldn't be here if they did it that way. So
True. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we wrap up this edition of Found Footage?
No, I love this one. This was one of my favorites. It's
Good.
so good.
I'm glad you got to be here to talk about it then.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for checking us out again. We're going to continue next week with Paranormal Activity 4. Yeah, let's just keep this Toby party going. We will see you next week. Bye bye.